Hello again. Another addition to the channel. Unit 2, HR. 2.2 Organisational Structure. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. There's more stuff coming along. Hope you enjoy. Organisational structure is relatively straightforward. One of the things that causes an issue is the terminology. So please work your way through all the terminology here and make sure you learn it. So what is a hierarchy, chain of command, span of control, delegation, bureaucracy, centralization, etc.? These are imperative in terms of understanding organizational structures. All an organizational structure actually is, when you set up your business, you have to structure it. You may be a sole trader. It's a one-man, one-woman business. So does you. So it's not a very complicated structure. But as you grow your business, your structure will become more complicated. So we're going to go through tall structures, flat structures, hierarchy, organization by function, by division, by geographical area. And you have to think more and more. The larger the business becomes, you have to control it somehow. So some people put in multiple layers of checks and management. Other people believe that it's too complicated, slows down decision making, and there's poor quality communication in the business. And they look for motivating staff, allowing them to make decisions themselves and being held accountable for what they do. But stage one of understanding the process is terminology. So work your way through the terms here. So some more terminology. Useful if you look at, if you're in school, what type of structure do they have there? Is there a principal, deputy principals, heads of each academic areas, operational areas in terms of maintenance? How is it organized? Okay, and look at the theory here, decide, is it hierarchy? You may have a part-time job. How is that organized? Tall structure, flat structure? But make this simple. Centralization means power basically at the center. In essence, you do not trust people. As you come across motivation theory, management, leadership styles, there's various assumptions people make. They have to control. They have less control. They put trust in people. They delegate. They decentralize. Delayering is taking layers out of your structure. Basically, getting rid of people. Do you need all those people? All those checks at various points? Less people equals less money, less cost. Also speeds up decision making. And again, matrix structure, you're going to come across specific type of organizational structure. Now, tall, vertical, and flat organizational charts. Again, do not make this complicated. I know it's a mantra you hear on most of these videos, but do not. You tend to find government departments, you tend to find the armed forces, the police, etc., that have a fairly tall structure. So think in the army, for example, at the bottom, the basic private, up to the chief of staff, the number of different levels to go through. Corporals, lance corporals, sergeants, sergeant majors, lieutenants, second lieutenants, first lieutenants, depending on where you are in the world. Layer after layer after layer. Okay, that's there for a specific purpose. Now, something like the armed forces, you need multiple layers to basically control the organization. Other businesses, where you're in a commercial environment, do you need the tool? Again, flat just means a lot less layers in your structure. Now, it became very fashionable 1980s, 1990s. Businesses tended to be very tall, and they decided to delayer. Delayer simply means shrink the organizational structure, remove the layers. So visually, all you have to do is draw triangles, one with multiple layers, as I've done here, the other one with fewer layers. And that's basically delayering in action. Short evaluation here of tall, vertical versus flat. Now, here's where your spans of control, your hierarchy, centralized, etc., comes into play. Now, you need to step back when you move on with your studies of HR. Again, going back to motivation, leadership, management. Certain people fit into certain structures more effectively than others. Some people like to be told what to do, so they have limited power. There's limited delegation. Delegation basically means giving somebody the opportunity to make one of your decisions. They have to have responsibility, but you're still accountable for it. Now, that motivates some people taking on additional responsibility. Other people, they don't want that. They just want to turn up, do a job, do a fairly limited job in terms of their power. They know that job, and if there's a problem, they just pass it on to someone else with more authority. Other people thrive on the challenge. So hence a delayering idea could motivate people, could help recruit people to organisation if there's opportunities for wider job roles in that sense. Other people, it may increase their stress levels if you delay and suddenly put more work on somebody, greater decision-making power. So again, it's one versus the other. It motivates, demotivates. It's a threat, it's an opportunity. Some managers cannot cope with relinquishing control. So hence, they need narrow spans of control, limited job descriptions in terms of what workers can and cannot do. Centralized decision making, they keep the power. Versus other managers believe in the fact of setting people free. Put their faith in them, trust in them, motivates, boost productivity, boost performance. So make sure you go through, you can evaluate both tall versus flat. And think about, particularly if you begin the process of delaying, taking the layers out, how could that be an advantage and also a potential drawback to your business? Drawing diagrams, here's a limited hierarchical structure. It simply just means layers. So here you've got a principal, two deputy principals. If you carried on with the chart, the next layer down will be the heads of faculties normally. Then you go through to individual team managers for subjects, economics, business management, science, or it could be physics on its own, depending on the number of students. So through that, you have team managers, and then basically have a team further on down. So hierarchy looks like that. Okay. Make sure when you draw a hierarchy, you can identify your span of control. This is where you need the definition. Look at the definition, look at diagrams, and be able to identify the span of control. Both numerically, count it off, and or looking at that's a narrow span of control, that's a wide span of control. Okay, that's just the number of layers in the hierarchy. Look at the chain of command. You can identify the chain of command on a diagram. Now, there's attempts to complicate matters. You could be presented with diagrams, as we've got here, organisational by function structure. Now, function simply means what you do. So how do you split your business up? Remember, this is all about organising your business, where you are and when you grow. This will change. If you're going to be an effective business to maintain your productivity, your efficiency, your competitive advantage, you look at the changing environment, look how your objectives are changing, and do need to restructure, delayer, reorganize around. Now, you could simply just have it by function. So you have a HR area, marketing, finance, etc. You could have organization by geographic area. So a lot of the car companies, you've got North America, Central America, South America, etc., operating as separate areas, and you bring together their performance figures for the whole business. But it's easier, particularly, think about Ford, for example. In the last case I checked, it's probably changed now. They were in 53 different countries. But they have to have a way of managing that beast across the world. Ford from the US, look at where they are. And so how are you going to do it? So it could be Ford Europe, it could be Ford UK, it could be Ford Southeast Asia. So they do that simply to identify areas. It's then to easier, basically, to assess performance. So do not get put off. Keep it simple. Organization by function, organization by structure. A couple of last points for the HR guys. Change in organizational structure. What's happened? Now, the matrix structure we mentioned at the start. Now, matrix. You're looking to be more flexible. As markets have become more competitive, you're looking to increase your flexibility and your ability to respond. So, this is all down to market changes. Use a team-based approach. Now, they tend to be time limited. Now, I've got examples here, construction, IT. You can have multiple projects on the go at the same time. And all you simply do is select workers from the functional areas to work in those teams. At the end of that project team is broken up and those workers reallocated to the next project. So think about businesses which are project based, which have constant projects coming in and work on a team. Now, next structure you need to look at is Handy. Gentleman called Charles Handy from Ireland, hence he used the shamrock. Now, it became fairly common for lots of businesses to move to what's called the shamrock organisational structure. Enabled you to cut your costs dramatically. Gave you flexibility. Now, if you have, say, variable demand, what you actually do is retain a core number of staff. Then you basically hire people in. So if you need extra workers, contract workers, think about seasonal businesses. Bring people in on contracts. Do you need to keep your own IT people? If there's an IT issue, you can outsource. That basically means your IT function is run by somebody else. You pay them. Payroll can be done this way. A lot of businesses, rather than work out their own payroll, they find someone else who's a larger provider and say, well, look, can you basically run out a payroll for all our workers? You pay a fee for it. Provide you with flexibility, reduces your costs. You're not running your own payroll department, for example. You're not paying out for very expensive, skilled IT professionals, software engineers. Okay, you just basically hire them in as and when you require them. So where you have a particularly constantly changing external environment, you need flexibility in your workforce plan. Allows you cost reduction and also gain competitive advantage, because obviously that money you've saved can be recycled back into the business. Okay, last point, evaluation of organisational structures. I will take this obviously HL and SL, just to put this in context. Now, step back, organisational structure, how you organise your business. The structure will become more complex as you grow. You have to have the most appropriate structure to suit your particular market circumstances. Okay, and your own views on how you motivate staff, you lead staff, okay, your management styles, etc., etc. So one size does not fit all. The structure could change. Any organisation will be subject to change in this external environment to a greater or lesser extent. Go back to your steeple. Look what's been happening in terms of Trump and his trade policies, how that's changed the global economy and created volatility. Growth, again, as your business grows. Do not look for one particular structure. You should be able to evaluate, is this the most appropriate structure, the benefits, drawbacks of this structure, given the circumstances we are facing? Can we change? Do we need to go to a matrix structure? Are we now in a situation where we are signing more contracts project-based in terms of our business? Can we basically start cutting staff and just basically hiring people in as and when we require them, just retain a core number of full-time permanent staff? Now, all of the choices on structure link again, I'm a piece of myself, I know, but I'm trying to emphasize motivation theory, leadership management styles. The structure tends to fit in with those three. So please make sure you put all of them together. Essentially, simple, that's the way to complicate it. Look at changing to organisational structure. Would the new structure be appropriate given your theory, motivation, and all your leadership style? Again, hopefully this has been useful as a revision tool. Please keep on checking the channel, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe.